Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the royal slippers, though let's be honest, they probably don't fit and they smell faintly of goat cheese because you're about to discover why it absolutely, spectacularly, and sometimes hilariously sucked to be a medieval queen. Forget the Disney fantasy. There are no talking mice, no glass slippers, and the only magic mirror is a vaguely shiny pot lid held up by a servant who's wondering why you keep asking if you're the fairest in the land. So before you get too comfortable, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy falling asleep to the absurd, uncomfortable truth about history. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, and whether you'd rather deal with a medieval moat or medieval in-laws. Now, dim the lights, turn on a fan for some courtly white noise, and tuck yourself in. Maybe surround yourself with a pillow fortress so the imaginary courtiers can't gossip about your snoring. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered what it was actually like being a medieval queen? Did you really get to just sit on a throne and eat grapes all day? Or was it mostly worrying about which relative was going to poison your soup? Was the crown as heavy as your student loans? Could you ever go to the bathroom alone? Did you get to pick your husband? Or did your future in-laws just send you a pigeon with a contract attached to its leg? What happened if you had a bad hair day and the court painter was waiting? Would you survive a day in a world where you could get in trouble for not producing enough royal babies? Or for producing too many? And what about all those castles? Were they cozy? Or was it like living in a giant, echoing, slightly damp refrigerator? Would you ever get a full night's sleep, or just a new batch of political nightmares? Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1382, and you are the queen of a medieval kingdom. You have a headache, a suspicious letter from your mother-in-law, and a very real chance of being blamed for the next plague. Let's see if you last until breakfast. You wake up in a bed the size of a small boat, shivering under wool blankets that smell faintly of centuries-old stress. At least 5 people are already hovering around you, each one determined to make sure you're alive, decent, and not plotting a coup before breakfast. You don't get to snooze the royal wake-up call. The court chamberlain is already opening the shutters, letting in a draft that could freeze ambition. There's no gentle transition from dream to day when you're the queen. Instead, the morning begins with the synchronized rustling of servants, the unmistakable sound of someone dropping a hairpin, and the court physician quietly hoping you don't cough. You try to curl deeper into the mattress, a lumpy, groaning relic that squeaks like a frightened mouse. But one of your ladies-in-waiting is already hovering with a damp cloth and the daily dose of restorative water, which mostly tastes like regret and whatever was growing in the castle cistern last week. Sunrise for a medieval queen is less about beauty and more about survival. The air is sharp and cold, somehow finding its way through the cracks in the stone walls and settling into your bones. There's always a persistent draft. Think of it as nature's way of reminding you that, despite the silk curtains, you still live in a glorified stone refrigerator. You might briefly wonder if the peasants are cold too, before realizing they're probably sleeping under goats for warmth while you're playing a royal round of guess which blanket has the least fleas. The first task of the day is to appear composed before the royal staff, which is code for don't look like you've just woken up in a wind tunnel. Unfortunately, this is nearly impossible when your hair has spent the night plotting a rebellion, and the only mirror in the room is polished metal that vaguely reflects your haunted expression back at you. The chamberlain bows and recites the morning schedule: prayers, breakfast, and an audience with your mother-in-law, whose smile is more dangerous than last winter's soup. If you're lucky, you'll get through it with your dignity intact and only minimal eye twitching. Your servants begin the ceremonial making of the queen, a process that involves more people than a modern flash mob. One is responsible for brushing your hair gently, which in medieval terms means not yanking it out by the roots. Another is dabbing your face with cold water, and a third is already picking out which slightly itchy gown you'll wear for the first 5 public events of the day. You'd like to protest, but it's clear no one's actually asking for your opinion. There's also a scribe in the corner, quietly jotting down notes, possibly to record your last words in case you don't survive another breakfast with the royal family. While you sit up, shivering, and try not to knock over the chamber pot lurking ominously under the bed, the chief lady-in-waiting hovers with a silver tray of herbal concoctions. They promise to restore your vitality, which is medieval code for this will taste like pond water and possibly make you see God. You drink it anyway, because being queen is mostly about swallowing things you don't want, be it potions, rumours, or advice from relatives who've never once made it to sunrise without help. As you're being dressed by committee, two courtiers quietly argue in the corner about whether you looked pale yesterday, and if that means another royal heir is on the way. The court is always watching, always speculating. Did you smile too much at Lord Pigeon-Toes during dinner? Are you secretly plotting to replace the king's favourite cook? Did you really sneeze 3 times in the chapel? Or was it just a clever distraction to avoid morning mass? The worst part is, you're never alone. The dog is in the corner, snoring louder than the king. Somewhere, a maid is sweeping, loudly enough to remind you she exists, but not so loud that you can accuse her of eavesdropping. You long for just 5 minutes of privacy, a moment to stretch without someone cataloguing the movement for posterity. But being queen isn't about comfort. It's about surviving each morning with a straight spine, a steady voice, and just enough mystery in your smile to keep the court guessing. By the time you're finally allowed to shuffle toward the chilly corridor, every muscle is clenched, every hair in place, and every ounce of royal dignity pressed into service, ready to face another day in the medieval spotlight. And as you glide past your bowing staff, you realize the only thing heavier than the crown is the expectation that you'll never let anyone see how tired you really are. Before you can even sit up, the ladies-in-waiting descend, armed with pins, combs, and opinions. Getting dressed is less put on pants and go and more let's negotiate an international treaty with your corset. Everyone's got an opinion, and your privacy is a fairy tale. The process begins with someone yanking back the last of the bed curtains, making sure the room is flooded with cold air and even colder judgment. Your bedchamber, once a sanctuary, is suddenly Grand Central Station for the Make the Queen Look Presentable committee. You're not entirely sure who half these women are, but they all seem very committed to smoothing your hair, straightening your sleeves, and whispering about whether you look radiant or just more awake than yesterday. The first order of business, removing the nightcap. If you're lucky, it hasn't welded itself to your scalp overnight, but chances are it's stuck in place by a combination of static, royal sweat, and the persistent fear of being summoned by your mother-in-law before noon. Your hair, of course, emerges in the classic style known as pre-coffee disaster. Within seconds, 2 ladies begin the delicate task of untangling your locks while another one produces a wooden comb that seems designed specifically for pain. This is not a quick process. Every knot is an opportunity for a story about someone's cousin who once combed her hair so well, she landed a minor baron. You're treated to a running commentary about the virtues of rosemary water, goose fat, and, for some reason, raw onions, while another servant gently suggests that a braid might cover last night's stress lines. If you dare suggest a simple hairstyle, at least 3 people launch into a passionate debate about whether that would please the court painter, your husband, or, most importantly, the fashion-obsessed duchess who always arrives unannounced and leaves smelling of cloves. Next comes the underlayer. A linen chemise that's never quite dry, smelling faintly of last week's lavender and yesterday's smoke. The fabric is cold, rough, and designed by someone who hated comfort. As it's pulled over your head, someone behind you is already brandishing the corset, the medieval answer to every posture problem and most breathing privileges. Getting into a corset is not something you do alone. It requires teamwork, patience, and a willingness to lose feeling in your lower ribs. One lady pulls the laces, another holds your shoulders, a third gives helpful tips about how to exhale. This is less about creating an hourglass figure, and more about achieving a shape that says, "I definitely didn't eat bread last night." After the corset comes the petticoat, the second petticoat, the mystery petticoat no one recalls owning, and a skirt so heavy it feels like you're wearing your own personal fortress. Meanwhile, you're trying to remember if you need to use the chamber pot, because once you're dressed, there's no going back, at least not without a committee vote and a 10-minute strategy session. Every layer is punctuated by a round of commentary from your attendants. The older ladies recall the good old days of hoop skirts and wool cloaks, while the younger ones debate which colour is most queenly. Eventually, a compromise is reached. Deep blue, the shade that won't clash with your natural winter pallor. Shoes are a whole separate adventure. If you're lucky, they fit. If not, you're reminded that queens don't walk, they glide with intent, even if that means limping with dignity. Accessories come next. A jewelled girdle that pinches exactly where you bruise. A necklace with a clasp so tricky it could double as a medieval intelligence test. And a veil that's carefully pinned into your scalp for maximum regal suffering. The finishing touch is the ceremonial ring slid onto your finger by the most senior attendant, as if you're being knighted into the order of surviving mornings. By the time the process is finished, you're swaddled in so many layers you could probably survive a fall from the castle tower. Your hair is a sculpted masterpiece, your waist is cinched to fashionable peril, and your hands are already sore from being poked, prodded, and perfumed. You take one last, longing look at your bed, wondering if anyone in history ever truly enjoyed this part of royalty. You're finally declared presentable. The doors are thrown open, and you're paraded out into the corridor, looking every inch the queen. If a queen was defined by exhaustion, mild panic, and the burning hope that nobody notices you're still wearing yesterday's socks. The day has only just begun, and already you're nostalgic for the era of pajamas. You'd think breakfast as a queen would be a feast, but it's mostly cold porridge, yesterday's bread, and the lingering taste of awkward silences. Everyone is watching what you eat, how you eat it, and whether you choke, because in the Middle Ages, that might be a sign someone's finally slipped something into your gruel. It's early, the fire in the great hall barely warming your toes, and already you're being ushered to the high table. Your dress, chosen by committee and weighing roughly the same as a medium-sized goat, trails behind you as you glide, not so much with grace as with the careful attention of someone avoiding loose floorboards and last night's spilled wine. The table, a gleaming slab of ancient oak, stretches out like a runway of intimidation, flanked by courtiers and visiting nobles who all seem to have been practicing their judgmental looks since before sunrise. Seated at the center, you're not just the queen, you're the morning's main event. Every movement you make is under observation. The way you lift your spoon, the order in which you sample your food, even the subtle sigh you let slip when you see the same bowl of lumpy porridge you saw yesterday and the day before that, and probably for the next 3 weeks. You try to eat neatly, which is difficult, because medieval cutlery is about as helpful as eating soup with a rake. The porridge is cold, the bread is harder than royal policy, and the honey, if you're lucky enough to have some, is guarded like the crown jewels. But the worst part isn't the food, it's the eyes. Across the hall, servants and nobles pretend to chat, but their glances dart constantly in your direction. Are you eating too much? Too little? Did you smile at the wrong lord yesterday? There's always the fear, sometimes justified, sometimes pure paranoia, that someone is scrutinizing your every bite for signs of weakness, illness, or dissatisfaction. Did you cough, or was that just a crumb? Either way, someone in the corner is already whispering about the queen's delicate constitution. You take a bite of bread and nearly lose a filling, if medieval dentistry even allowed for such luxuries. Conversation, if it happens at all, is stilted and formal. Occasionally, your husband, the king, will break the silence by asking about the weather, as if any of you have seen the sky since the last jousting tournament. Meanwhile, you make polite noises and nod along, praying the court jester doesn't decide to test out new material before you've finished your first cup of watered-down ale. And yes, ale at breakfast. Not because you're trying to turn breakfast into a bottomless brunch, but because water is generally considered more dangerous than most political alliances. If you're feeling bold, you might sip a little watered wine, but only if the cupbearer looks trustworthy, which, in your experience, is about as rare as a day without gossip. This isn't just a meal, it's a performance. You have to look interested in the food, engaged in conversation, and blissfully unbothered by the creeping suspicion that your cousin's cousin just tried to have you poisoned last Tuesday. The steward approaches, offering you a slice of cheese that smells faintly of ambition and feet. You accept it with the practiced smile of someone who's learned that refusing anything at table can and will be interpreted as a diplomatic slight. Just when you think the ordeal is over, the court physician appears, hovering like a particularly anxious cloud. He's just observing, but you know he's mentally taking notes for his next letter to your mother-in-law. The Queen did not finish her porridge. The Queen coughed twice. The Queen looked pale, but it might have been the lighting. Even your complexion is a matter of state security. By the time the plates are cleared, you're full, mostly of anxiety and medieval carbohydrates. Breakfast isn't about nourishment. It's about surviving another morning under the cold, unblinking stare of your kingdom. You rise carefully, rehearsing the expression of regal satisfaction you'll need to wear all day. As you leave the hall, you promise yourself that tomorrow you'll just stick to the bread. It's hard enough to break your teeth, but at least it's not likely to be poisoned. Probably. You can't sneeze without someone spreading rumors about it. Welcome to a world where every side-eye, every poorly timed hiccup, and every extra trip to the garderobe becomes tomorrow's scandal. Gossip travels faster than the plague, and you're always the headline. The first thing you notice about royal life isn't the gold, the tapestries, or even the ever-present draft. It's the relentless hum of whispering voices. There's always someone peering from behind a pillar, listening at the keyhole, or just passing through the corridor while you try to have a private word with your confessor. You might think you could outwit them by talking quietly, but medieval castles were designed for echoes. One careless comment, and by lunchtime, everyone's convinced you're plotting to marry the stable boy, start a war with Flanders, or replace the king's bathwater with soup. You try to stay neutral. You offer vague answers, practice your most mysterious smile, and never ever say anything negative about anyone's cooking. Still, somehow, rumours bloom like mould in the pantry. Did the Queen really laugh at Lady Swansbottom's hat? Is she really teaching her lapdog to bite the ambassador from Aquitaine? Has she actually read all those books? Or does she just use them to hide secret love notes? There's nothing too big or too petty to become tomorrow's headline. At court, gossip is currency. It's the medieval equivalent of social media, only with more embroidery and slightly less privacy. Nobles and servants alike trade tidbits in a never-ending game of who knows what, and when did they know it. If you dare look tired in the morning, you're gravely ill. If you look too cheerful, you're clearly up to something. Someone once sneezed twice in the presence of a bishop, and by sunset, the rumour was they'd converted to heresy and were planning to elope with a Flemish cheese merchant. Being queen means living in a fishbowl. Only the fish are more judgmental, and at least half of them want your crown. You become a master of self-control, perfecting the art of neutral expressions and diplomatic small talk. You learn to never let your eyes linger too long on anyone or anything, lest it be interpreted as a secret message. Eye contact with the wrong noble? That's a 3-day scandal, and at least one anonymous poem tacked to the castle door. Then there are the spies. Some wear livery and announce themselves with grand bows. Others are disguised as harmless maids, musicians, or that one gardener who's always trimming the same rosebush. They're always eager to help, mostly by reporting everything you do to your mother-in-law, the king, or the local bishop, sometimes all at once. Even your confessor is probably making notes for his next confession. Of course, the gossip isn't all bad. Sometimes it's almost entertaining. You hear tales of your own secret travels to distant castles you've never seen, or elaborate stories about how you personally foiled a plot to poison the king with a cleverly placed lemon tart. You listen to stories about your wardrobe being haunted by the ghost of a jealous duchess, or how you once fought off a wild boar with nothing but a candlestick and a firm look. The truth doesn't matter, as long as the story is good and the talk keeps swirling. The worst part? You can't escape it, even in your own chambers. The walls, after all, have ears, and sometimes those ears are actually your ladies-in-waiting who have already heard everything before you have. By the time you sit down to dinner, the latest scandal has already gone through 3 revisions, 5 witnesses, and at least 2 dramatic reenactments by the jesters. The story might involve you, your cousin, and a mysterious knight from the north, and somehow ends with someone losing their trousers. You start to see why the former queen preferred falconry. It's harder to eavesdrop on a bird. But even falcons can't protect you from courtly whispers. The only real defense is to play along, keep your secrets close. And remember, in this castle, every day is a new headline. And you're always front-page news, whether you like it or not. Ever tried wearing 20 pounds of velvet, fur and regret while pretending you're not sweating through your wimple? Welcome to the royal wardrobe, where one size fits none, and if you faint from heatstroke, you'd better do it gracefully. Let's be clear, royal fashion in the Middle Ages is not about comfort. It's about declaring, in itchy wool and embroidery, that you're important enough to ruin your posture and possibly your circulation for the sake of appearances. You're surrounded by ladies-in-waiting, each armed with opinions, pins, and what can only be described as vintage perfumes. They eye you like a project, a canvas, and sometimes a stubborn wardrobe malfunction waiting to happen. Your daily transformation begins with the underlayers, a linen chemise, if you're lucky, which acts as both undergarment and barely there shield against everything that's coming next. After that comes the stiffened bodice, a medieval straitjacket whose only goal is to force your ribs into a shape that says, "I have not eaten bread since Pentecost." The corset is laced so tightly you could, in theory, whistle in 3 octaves, but breathing is now more of an art than a science. Next comes the petticoats. There are never enough petticoats. If your dress stands up by itself in the corner, you're halfway there. The fabric is rough, the seams always manage to itch in places you didn't know could itch, and any movement more complicated than a cautious glide will set off a chorus of sighs from your attendants. If you thought layering for winter was bad, try layering for an audience with foreign dignitaries in midsummer. You're sweating buckets, but the queen is never supposed to glisten, she glows, preferably somewhere out of sight. And now, the main event, the gown. Velvet if you're trying to look rich, fur if you're trying not to freeze, brocade if you really want to challenge your core strength. This isn't just an outfit, it's a medieval exoskeleton. Some days you feel like a cake, some days a tapestry, but always, always like you're wearing every curtain in the castle at once. The sleeves are so long and heavy, they could double as dueling weapons. You're reminded, not for the first time, that these gowns were not designed for practical living. No running, no climbing stairs, and absolutely no sneaking off for a quiet moment in the garden. Accessories are not optional. Heavy jeweled girdles cinch your waist, elaborate collars scratch at your neck, and your head is topped with a wimple, veil, or if you're feeling lucky, a hennin, a cone hat that doubles as a weather vane, and a personal hazard for low doorways. The jewelry, of course, is meant to show off the wealth of the realm, but mostly it just threatens to pull you headfirst into your soup. Every ring, every pearl, every heavy gold chain is another reminder that fashion in the Middle Ages is just social armor, flashy, uncomfortable, and occasionally sharp. And then there's the color. Royalty means strict color codes. Heaven forbid you choose the wrong shade of blue and send the wrong message to a neighboring duchy. The wrong hue. And suddenly the castle is abuzz with rumors of impending war or, worse, a fashion crisis. Your clothing isn't just about you. It's about everyone's expectations, your family's reputation, and whatever passing trends the French court invented last Thursday. Moving in these clothes is a skill. Sitting down? An Olympic event. Try not to split a seam, topple a goblet, or accidentally flash an ankle. That's for scandal, not breakfast. Bathing in perfume is mandatory, if only to mask the collective aroma of wool, stress, and a hint of old garlic from last night's feast. By midday, you're dreaming of pajamas, or at least a chance to remove one layer without convening a council, You can't help but envy the peasants their loose tunics, despite the fleas. Still, you stand tall, wobbling slightly in shoes that fit someone else's feet, wearing a smile that says, "This is fine. This is fashion. I am absolutely not melting inside this walking tapestry." The truth is, the royal wardrobe is its own kind of throne, high, uncomfortable, and completely inescapable. And if you must faint, do it gracefully. After all, nothing says queen-like passing out in a pile of velvet, then waking to hear that your collapse is already the talk of the court, because, as always, the only thing heavier than the crown is the outfit that comes with it. You sit for hours, while your hair is yanked, twisted, and shellacked into shapes not seen since the last architectural disaster. The goal is to look regal, but most days you look like a startled sheep in a tiara. Being queen means never having a simple hair day. From the moment the first lady-in-waiting whips out her brush, a sturdy device that looks more like it's meant for grooming livestock, you know you're in for a battle. Your hair, still half asleep and wildly independent, resists every attempt at order. One servant tugs, another smooths, and a third debates whether your hairline should be fashionably high, which is medieval for let's pluck out a third of your bangs until you look constantly surprised. In the Middle Ages, beauty standards are, to put it politely, unique. The ideal royal forehead stretches for miles. No one wants wispy baby hairs. They want a forehead you could write a short poem on. So, after a quick consultation, your attendants start tweezing away, their enthusiasm outpacing your pain tolerance. You grit your teeth and dream of a future where the only thing anyone plucks are eyebrows. Next comes the application of herbal washes. Some days it's rosemary water for shine. Other days it's a mysterious tonic rumoured to encourage thickness, though it smells suspiciously like last week's soup. Your scalp tingles, your sinuses weep, and you try to convince yourself that the smell is botanical and not barnyard adjacent. Then come the braids, buns, and twists. Medieval hairstyles are as complicated as a royal inheritance dispute, and almost as likely to end in tears. Today, you're due for a crown braid, which means every strand must be pinned in place with iron resolve and actual iron pins. Your ears are poked, your scalp is scalded, and your head begins to feel like a construction site for a very ambitious bird's nest. Occasionally, a servant will gasp and claim to see a grey hair, at which point the entire room goes silent. A grey hair on the Queen. Out come the herbal remedies and whispered prayers, as if a single rogue strand could bring down the monarchy. Of course, nothing says royal glamour like the liberal use of pomades, waxes, oils, and ointments mixed with rose petals, goose grease, and whatever else survived in the apothecary this month. Your hair becomes simultaneously glossy and oddly sticky, catching the light and, if you're unlucky, the occasional passing insect. If you're feeling particularly unfortunate, today is the day for a hennin, the infamous conical hat, taller than your dignity and requiring at least 2 people to balance. The hennin must be carefully anchored into your freshly tortured hair, secured by pins, ribbons, and hope. If the wind picks up, you risk being airborne. If you sit too close to a candle, you risk starting the next great castle fire. Let's not forget the head coverings, veils, wimples, and decorative nets. Each layer is fastened with more pins, some of which will stay hidden in your hair until next Tuesday. The goal is to achieve a look that says regal mystery, but often the effect is closer to accidentally wandered out of a medieval puppet show. On special occasions, someone will try to dust your hair with scented powder to hide the ever-present aroma of wood smoke, stress, and resignation. The result? An itchy scalp, a nose full of sneeze-inducing herbs, and a fine white mist that settles on your shoulders like a very confused ghost. At last, the mirror, a polished bit of metal, reveals the final result. Elaborate, towering, undeniably royal, and ever so slightly crooked. But at least you look different from the peasants, and really, isn't that what counts? You hold your head high, trying not to think about the pins digging into your scalp or the pomade slowly melting under the heat of 100 candles. This is medieval beauty. Equal parts endurance, hope, and creative hair management. As you walk out, head held high and weighed down, you know your hair will be the talk of the court. Some will say, "You look divine." Others will blame any awkward angles on the humidity or, inevitably, court intrigue. But tomorrow the whole circus starts again, because in the Middle Ages, the only thing harder than being queen is keeping your hair in line long enough to enjoy it. Every day is a pageant you never signed up for. There are ceremonies, processions, endless hand-waving, and the constant risk of tripping over your own dress in front of the entire kingdom. The peasants love you, mostly because you're a distraction from their own misery. Being queen means you're on display, always, everywhere, and sometimes even while you sleep. No, really, once a poet wrote a sonnet about you snoring. The minute you set foot in the corridor, you become the star of the least relaxing parade ever invented. The air is heavy with incense and expectation. Trumpets blare, banners wave, and you have to muster the energy to look regal for the 6th day in a row, even if your feet are numb and your smile feels like it's been plastered on by the royal bricklayer. The first event of the day? A formal greeting with visiting nobles, each of whom expects you to remember their names, their family trees, and their ongoing feuds about who owns which sheep. You nod graciously while a courtier whispers cheat notes into your ear. Unfortunately, these notes are mostly wrong, so you end up congratulating the Count of Marshwiggle on his recent barnacle harvest. He's confused. You're confused. The audience is delighted. After that, it's a procession through the castle courtyard. You're meant to glide, serene and untouchable, while the local townsfolk line up for a glimpse of the Queen. You try to maintain a dignified wave, not too floppy, not too stiff. Just the right amount of, "I care about your turnip harvest, but please don't touch my dress." The children cheer, the old women gossip about the state of your hair, and at least one ambitious goose tries to join the parade. The danger is real. The path is lined with uneven stones, livestock on the loose, and hopeful flower throwers who have terrible aim. You smile bravely through it all, even when someone tosses a slightly wilted cabbage in your general direction. Slipping is a constant threat. One bad step, and you'll become the subject of epic poems and dinner jokes for years. You practice the art of tripping gracefully. If you must fall, make it look intentional, as if you're kneeling to bless the ground or pet a nearby dog. Ceremonies are relentless. There are blessings to bestow, ribbons to cut, fountains to admire, and occasionally a pig to name in honor of a saint. At each stop, you recite carefully memorized lines, sometimes in Latin, sometimes in the local dialect, always hoping you're not accidentally declaring war on a neighboring duchy. The priests nod approvingly, the nobles keep score, and the peasants just want to see if you'll do something interesting, like sneeze or faint. Your face aches from smiling, your wrist aches from waving, and your neck aches from trying to keep your crown upright while nodding at every passing dignitary. The procession moves at the speed of molasses, but you're expected to look delighted the entire time. If you pause to rest, someone will interpret it as a sign of scandalous weakness, and by sunset, the rumor will be that you're pregnant with twins or plotting to run away to a convent. The best part of these parades, if there is one, is the parade food, tiny bites of roast meats, sugared fruits, or the occasional medieval energy ball, basically a walnut with honey. But you have to eat delicately, without smudging your face paint or getting crumbs in your bodice. You long for a sandwich in privacy, but the closest you get is nibbling a stale sweetmeat while 3 minstrels sing directly into your ear. By late afternoon, you're back inside, your feet throbbing, and your dress bearing the faint evidence of both mud and peasant enthusiasm. The parade is over for today, but there's another scheduled for tomorrow and the day after, and every major feast day until you die. You collapse onto a velvet chair, hoping no one notices the wilted flower stuck to your hem, and marvel at the stamina of queens past. Because the truth is, public appearances are less about glory and more about survival. surviving fashion disasters, uneven paving stones, and the daily grind of being everyone's favorite royal distraction. You take a deep breath, readjust your crown, and remind yourself, this is the job. If you must trip, do it with dignity. If you must wave, do it with style. And if you must endure another parade tomorrow, at least you'll know how to dodge a goose with slightly more finesse. Your to-do list includes reading endless petitions, pretending to care about new pig taxes, and listening to nobles complain about soup temperature. Nothing you do is ever quite right, and everything is somehow your fault. Being a medieval queen means you don't just reign, you administrate, adjudicate, and occasionally mediate family disputes involving goats, fences, or whose turn it is to ring the chapel bell. Forget the image of lounging around all day eating sugared figs. Your daily planner looks more like a never-ending scroll of impossible demands and questionable priorities. The castle steward hands you a stack of parchment at breakfast, and from that moment on, the agenda is relentless. First on the docket, petitions from the commoners. You sit on a throne that's less comfortable than it looks, surrounded by advisors who all smell faintly of mildew and self-importance. Each peasant approaches with hat in hand, requesting mercy for overdue rents, forgiveness for a runaway sheep, or clemency after someone accidentally set fire to the hayloft. Every complaint is delivered with the solemnity of a legal hearing, and every solution seems to involve you writing a letter, making a ruling, or offering up one of your personal chickens as a sign of royal goodwill. Next comes the council meeting, a truly medieval punishment. You're joined by nobles who, despite claiming to be very busy, somehow have hours to debate the kingdom's pressing issues. Why the Northfield is so muddy, who's been stealing apples from the orchard, and whether the bishop's cat should be excommunicated for suspicious meowing. You're expected to have an opinion on all these things, or at least pretend to. If you stay silent, you're accused of aloofness. If you speak, you're accused of overstepping. Either way, you're taking notes for your next life, preferably as a fishmonger. Then come the tax collectors, eager to explain the complexities of medieval finance using more charts and wooden tokens than you thought existed in the kingdom. Pig taxes are up, so is the cost of candle wax, and apparently there's a salt shortage caused by witches in the forest. You listen patiently, nodding in what you hope is a wise and queenly fashion, all while secretly dreaming of a time when the only thing you had to calculate was how many sweetmeats you could sneak before dinner. In between, there are endless interruptions. The head cook bursts in to explain why the soup is too thin, bad barley, not bad technique, followed by the chief falconer reporting a minor diplomatic crisis caused by a hawk who dive-bombed a visiting count. There's always something that needs the Queen's judgment, which is medieval code for no one else wants to make this decision, so let's blame the lady in the fancy hat. And let's not forget correspondence. Your desk is piled high with letters from other royals, each one demanding a reply, a gift, or an apology for a slight you didn't even know you committed. Dictating responses is an exercise in restraint. How many different ways can you say, "Your concerns are very important to us," when what you really mean is, "Please stop sending me complaints about the state of your moat"? On top of all this, you're responsible for uplifting the moral tone of the court. That means organizing feasts, supervising religious observances, and pretending to enjoy medieval poetry recitations that last longer than most minor illnesses. If the minstrels go off-key, or the priests forget the order of prayers, it's your problem. If the pies are burnt, it's somehow your fault, even if you haven't seen a kitchen in months. By late afternoon, your head is spinning, your patience is fraying, and your hand aches from writing so many gracious royal edicts. You find yourself solving disputes about whose sheep ate whose cabbage, all while trying to keep the kingdom from dissolving into chaos or, worse, bad press from the local bard. It's exhausting, thankless, and a masterclass in responsibility with no vacation days. As the sun sets and you finally stagger back to your chambers, you realize the real crown jewel isn't gold or pearls. It's surviving a day of royal duties without screaming into the tapestry. Tomorrow, the scroll starts all over again. But tonight, you get to cross one thing off your list. Survived another day as queen. Not bad for someone who started the day listening to pig tax complaints before breakfast. Your husband is chosen for you based on how many goats he owns, not his sparkling personality. Romance is a political transaction, and your wedding night is less about passion and more about witnesses making sure it happened. Forget roses and moonlit walks in the garden. Your love story started in a negotiation chamber, not a sun-dappled orchard. Medieval marriage for queens is less happily ever after, and more hopefully no one's armies show up at the reception. Your hand in marriage is the kingdom's most valuable bargaining chip, and your heart doesn't even get a vote. The entire arrangement is orchestrated years before you're old enough to understand why your future in-laws keep sending expensive cheeses and suspiciously flattering portraits. Your future husband, a man you may meet only hours before the wedding, arrives with an entourage and a genealogy scroll that reads like a livestock inventory. The court spends months haggling over dowries, land, and who gets to keep the really good soup tureen. If he has a sense of humor, you'll never know it. No one has time for jokes when they're busy confirming titles and counting sheep. On your wedding day, the castle is stuffed with people who all have strong opinions about your new life. You're wrapped in ceremonial layers, crowned in flowers and family expectations, and paraded through town like a prize cow, if prize cows wore veils and uncomfortable shoes. The ceremony is equal parts holy sacrament and public spectacle. There's a priest, a few local saints invoked for luck, and at least one relative openly weeping into their mead, probably about the loss of their favorite goat in the negotiations. And then comes the wedding feast, a marathon of lukewarm stews, stale bread, and endless toasts to the happy couple. Nobles get into tipsy arguments about which side of the family is more distinguished, and the minstrels play the same song 6 times because no one dares ask for anything different. You're expected to smile through every awkward joke and pretend you're not wondering whether your new husband can even remember your name, let alone your birthday. Of course, the real fun starts when the guests have had their fill of ale. That's when the witnesses gather, yes, actual witnesses, to make sure the marriage is consummated. There's no candlelit privacy. Instead, it's a room full of nervous giggling, stifled coughs, and a handful of people waiting for the all clear. It's less 50 Shades of Grey, more 50 Shades of Awkward Beige. No pressure, right? Life as a married queen isn't any easier. Your husband, busy with affairs of state, and possibly several affairs of his own, expects you to run the household, manage court politics, and produce heirs as quickly as possible. If you get along, congratulations. You're the medieval equivalent of a power couple. If you don't, well, get used to separate wings of the castle and the world's most formal dinner conversations. Romance, if it comes at all, is accidental, a passing smile across the feast table, a shared laugh over a spilled wine goblet, or a mutual sigh when yet another delegation of in-laws arrives unannounced. Most of the time, your relationship is built on duty, negotiation, and the unspoken agreement not to poison each other's soup. Modern marriage advice? Irrelevant. There's no date night unless you count sitting side by side while the bishop lectures you about producing sons. The truth is, being a queen in a marriage alliance means every feeling is political, every argument has witnesses, and every child you bear comes with a side of public commentary. Your marriage isn't a private affair, it's a chess game played in front of the entire kingdom. The only thing more complicated than the rules is figuring out which side you're on. Still, you manage, because you have to. You learn the art of small talk, the power of polite distance, and how to look serene during a disagreement about pig taxes. Maybe, on a good day, you find a glimmer of true affection beneath the heavy crown and thicker protocol. Or maybe you just find the humor in it all, laughing quietly to yourself that in the end, love in the Middle Ages was mostly about staying alive, staying sane, and occasionally getting the last piece of cheese. Want to sleep in? Forget it. Someone is always barging in with news, food, or a new cousin. There's no such thing as me time unless you count the few minutes you spend staring into the fireplace, contemplating exile. Your bedchamber, supposedly your sanctuary, is actually a thoroughfare for half the population of the castle. From the moment dawn peeks through the tiny leaded windows, your private space becomes a public highway. There's the maid with the morning coals, the page delivering messages, the cook's assistant with a tray of suspiciously lumpy porridge, and at least one relative who simply happened to be passing by. Even the family dog finds its way to your rug, tracking in mud and a faint smell of boiled cabbage. You might imagine that as queen, you could command a moment of solitude. Absolutely not. Any attempt at locking the door will be met with confusion, followed by a court meeting about the queen's sudden withdrawal and whether or not she's plotting something, probably with the stable boy. Medieval privacy is an urban legend, passed down by desperate queens with wild eyes and suspiciously large libraries. The furniture in your chamber is designed less for comfort and more for display. Your bed is grand, but not cozy. A creaking four-poster built to impress visiting nobles rather than actually help you sleep. Every blanket and pillow has a decorative tassel, and every tapestry depicts scenes of saints, battles, or people looking very uncomfortable on horseback. There's a writing desk you rarely use, because every time you sit down with a quill, someone is there to assist you, which means watching over your shoulder and offering unsolicited advice on how to spell magnanimity. Even your moments of rest are choreographed. Afternoon naps are interrupted by visits from your mother-in-law, armed with helpful advice. The royal physician, eager to check your pulse for the 15th time this week, and the endlessly cheerful court chaplain, just checking that you're still virtuous, your grace. If you attempt to retreat behind your bed curtains, servants take it as a cue to air out your sheets, fluff the pillows, and launch a full-scale investigation into the origins of that mysterious stain. When night finally arrives, you'd expect the chaos to subside. Instead, the castle comes alive with strange creaks, distant arguments, and the echo of someone practicing the lute in the corridor badly. You try to unwind by the fireplace, but even here, a conga line of courtiers marches through, each with urgent news about dinner menus, weather forecasts, or someone's engagement to a minor baron. Your only real chance at peace is to stare into the flames, zoning out so convincingly that even the servants begin to question your sanity. And forget about having a private conversation. Every word you whisper is carried through drafty corridors by a network of eager listeners, maids, pages, and the occasional squirrel. The moment you utter anything remotely interesting, it's halfway to the kitchens and being embellished by someone who swears they saw you plotting with a mysterious stranger. It was the cat. Personal belongings? Good luck. Every item you own, combs, letters, your favorite cloak, has been moved, borrowed, or misplaced by someone else. If you do manage to hide anything, the Chamberlain will find it during the weekly security sweep, just in case you're stashing love notes or, heaven forbid, unauthorized snacks. Still, you adapt. You learn the fine art of answering questions with non-committal hums and the ancient sport of hiding in plain sight. Maybe you find solace in writing poetry in your head, or learning to meditate while standing upright and smiling politely at yet another distant cousin. Sometimes you catch a rare moment of quiet, just long enough to remember what it felt like to have your own thoughts. In the end, being queen means accepting that privacy is a fleeting dream, a myth embroidered into the castle tapestries, alongside unicorns and honest tax collectors. You get used to the interruptions, the parade of visitors, and the reality that your bedchamber is really everyone's favorite shortcut. At least the fireplace never judges you for daydreaming about life as a peasant, where the only thing barging into your room is a very determined chicken. Your main job is producing children, preferably boys. Every missed period is public news, and if you sneeze twice in a row, half the court starts betting on the baby's hair color. Welcome to royal motherhood, medieval style, the world's most high-stakes maternity ward. If you thought the pressure of sending out holiday cards was bad, try carrying the hopes of an entire kingdom in your womb. The minute you're married, Everyone from the king's grandmother to the guy who sweeps the stables is suddenly an expert on your reproductive health. The royal physicians are on standby at all times, ready to read omens from your complexion, your appetite, or your emotional reaction to cold stew. Medieval science may be primitive, but court speculation is a highly evolved art form. The pressure starts early. Your wedding flowers have barely wilted before the questions begin. How's the Queen feeling? Is there any news? Has she started favouring one side when she walks? Every time you yawn, someone's consulting a chart. A craving for pears? Clearly a sign of a girl. Extra pale? That's twins, obviously. The palace rumour mill is so relentless, you'd swear half the kingdom is just hanging around outside your chambers, waiting to hear if you sneeze, faint, or, heaven forbid, ask for extra pudding. There's a running tally among the courtiers, who place wagers on when you'll announce a pregnancy, what the baby's star sign will be, and how many godparents will have titles longer than their actual names. Ladies-in-waiting develop sudden interests in herbal tea and fertility charms, all of which are subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, pressed upon you just in case. Every old wife's tale, miracle relic, and questionable tonic finds its way to your bedside. And of course, it's not just about having a baby, it's about having the right baby. The kingdom wants a boy, preferably sturdy and healthy, someone to carry on the royal line, inherit the crown, and, ideally, not start a civil war before age 10. Each time you're seen near a chapel, people wonder if you're praying for a son or for a reprieve from all the awkward questions. Daughters are a blessing, but sons are a requirement. If you produce an heir, you're a hero. If not, you're the subject of late-night prayers, hushed whispers, and, in extreme cases, international marriage negotiations. Pregnancy itself is a public event. There's no such thing as a private trimester. The court physician monitors every detail, from your pulse to your dreams. Even the castle cook gets involved, sending special broths and nutritive gruels to your chambers. If you dare look tired or pass on the fish stew, it's breaking news. No one wants to mention how many pregnancies end in heartbreak, or how terrifying childbirth really is, especially when the best medical advice still involves leeches and muttered Latin. Labour and delivery are a full-court spectacle. The entire castle mobilizes, servants boil water, priests gather for prayers, and distant relatives arrive hoping for a front-row seat and possibly a slice of christening cake. Privacy? Forget it. Your birthing chamber is packed with midwives, nurses, and at least 3 people who claim to be experts based on a dream they had last Tuesday. When the baby finally arrives, there's a collective sigh of relief or a palpable disappointment, depending on whether the new arrival comes with the appropriate plumbing. And the speculation doesn't stop there. The baby's first cry, hair colour, even the shape of their nose sparks a fresh round of gossip and predictions. Grandmothers start telling you how to raise the child, while foreign ambassadors send congratulatory letters or awkwardly worded condolences. If the baby is a boy, you're the pride of the palace. If not, you're encouraged to rest up and try again soon, which in royal language means, we're watching you, and so is all of Europe. Somehow, through it all, you keep your composure. You learn to smile at the speculation, to nod politely when someone hands you yet another fertility charm, and to find small moments of real joy in the private bond between mother and child. Because if history teaches anything, it's that being a queen means living your most intimate moments on the public stage, and surviving with grace, humour, and maybe a well-hidden stash of pears for emergencies. You're responsible for heirs, spares, and a parade of wet nurses. If the baby sneezes, 6 physicians appear with conflicting advice involving leeches, boiled onions, and very nervous prayers. Welcome to motherhood in the Middle Ages, where every cradle holds the future of the kingdom and every nap is interrupted by a team of self-proclaimed experts. The pressure to produce and then keep your offspring alive is enough to make even the most battle-hardened noblewoman reconsider her life choices. It's not just about nurturing, It's about navigating a gauntlet of germs, gossip, and good intentions gone very, very sideways. Your royal nursery is the busiest room in the castle. There are midwives, nannies, wet nurses, and backups for the wet nurses, governesses, and a rotating cast of relatives with unsolicited advice. At any given hour, at least 3 people are hovering around the royal bassinet, each certain they know the secret to surviving babyhood in a time when everything, including the water, might try to kill you. Is the baby too hot? Too cold? Are the swaddling bands tied with just the right degree of optimism? There's a strong chance you'll hear all 3 opinions simultaneously, followed by a heated debate about whether garlic should be worn as a necklace or merely tucked under the pillow. Feeding time is an event. If you nurse your own child, you're praised for your maternal devotion and quietly judged for being too peasant-like. If you rely on a wet nurse, people start keeping score. Whose milk, whose morals, whose loyalty. Every mouthful is political, and every burp is a minor miracle. The baby's feeding schedule is a matter of public record, subject to the scrutiny of everyone from the court scribe to your great-aunt with a suspiciously detailed memory for bowel movements. Sleep, for both you and the baby, is an elaborate game of medieval roulette. There are no baby monitors, just anxious servants peering over you as you rock a colicky air at 3 a.m., hoping the lullaby you half remembered from your own childhood isn't actually a recipe for summoning angry saints. If the baby cries, a council is convened. Was it something you ate? Is the nursery cursed? Is it time to burn more incense or call in the royal astrologer? The only certainty is that if the baby finally does sleep, someone will barge in to check that it's still breathing, waking everyone in the process. Sickness is the constant shadow of medieval childhood. The moment a sniffle appears, you're surrounded by a half-dozen medical minds, each with their favorite cure. Leeches are always popular, because nothing says get well soon like a jar of squirming bloodsuckers at the foot of your cradle. If not leeches, then onion poultices, herbal compresses, or a restorative syrup so pungent it's basically despair in a bottle. Prayer, of course, is the final prescription, preferably performed loudly and with the assistance of several relics and at least one saint's toenail. Beyond the physical challenges is the emotional gauntlet of royal parenting. You love your children, but you're also expected to prepare them for political marriages, future wars, and the general trauma of being a royal in a world where even a teething biscuit can spark an international incident. The nursemaids whisper about omens. The tutors drill the ABCs of etiquette, Latin, and how not to accidentally offend a visiting duke. Every milestone, first steps, first words, first time someone mistakes them for a minor deity, becomes a matter of kingdom-wide discussion. And let's not forget the parade of spares. One heir is never enough. You need backups in case history, plague, or the royal stairs claim the firstborn. Each child is precious, but also a tiny insurance policy. Every birthday is a victory, every lost tooth a source of hope and anxiety. Through it all, you somehow keep smiling, dodging dubious medical advice, celebrating small triumphs, and hugging your little ones tightly. In the chaos of medieval motherhood, you become an expert at finding love in a world where nothing is guaranteed except worry and a rotating roster of nervous physicians. If you survive all this with your sanity and your sense of humor, history might just remember you as the queen who kept her heirs, her spares, and herself alive against all odds. Food is either extravagant or suspiciously crunchy. Every bite is a gamble. Will it be delicious venison, or will you spend the afternoon hoping you're not the next victim of accidental poisoning? Welcome to the royal dining table, where every meal is a parade of delicacies, dangers, and diplomatic landmines. You'd think being queen means feasting like royalty, and, in a way, it does, but only if your definition of feasting includes the constant threat of culinary sabotage, suspicious stews, and enough salt to mummify a carrot. You never quite know if the next bite is going to be the highlight of your day or the last thing you ever taste. Let's start with breakfast. A ceremonial affair, heavy on tradition, light on actual nutrition. Sometimes it's just yesterday's cold bread, cheese that has ambitions of becoming a new species, or an egg that's been boiled within an inch of its life. Other days, the kitchen staff attempts something grand, platters of stewed fruits, fancy pastries, and fish that's only slightly less slippery than the court gossip. And, of course, there's ale, because the water is as trustworthy as a minor noble with gambling debts. Lunch might be more impressive, but it's rarely relaxing. The food itself is often a display of the kitchen's creativity or desperation. You could be served roasted swan, gilded with actual gold leaf, which, by the way, tastes exactly like nothing but impresses visiting ambassadors, or a stew with so many unidentifiable ingredients you start making your peace with the afterlife. The chef's motto? If it fits in the pot, it's dinner. This is fine until you find something with legs you weren't expecting. The real event is the evening banquet, a marathon of food, pageantry, and thinly veiled threats. The table groans under the weight of spiced meats, sugared fruits, almond milk custards, and pies filled with anything from pears to pigeons. If it can be stuffed, roasted, or glazed, it ends up on your plate. This sounds delightful, until you realize you're being watched. Every forkful is public performance. If you eat too heartily, it's noted. If you avoid a dish, the rumour mill churns. Was the Queen displeased, or merely avoiding the special pie brought by the Duke's extremely ambitious wife? And then there's the ever-present shadow of poisoning. No, it's not just something in movies. Poison is a genuine occupational hazard for queens. Food tasters are assigned to your table, bravely nibbling your meat and sipping your wine, all while pretending they aren't terrified. You learn to watch their expressions closely. If the taster's face turns green, you quietly push your plate away and make a mental note to avoid that dish at the next feast. If they survive, well, bon appetit. But it's not just poison that threatens your peace of mind. Medieval food safety is a myth. Refrigeration is leave it in the cold room and pray, and best before dates are measured in does it smell like something's died in there. Some days the bread is fresh and the venison perfectly spiced. Other days, you're playing culinary roulette, chewing carefully, while a tiny voice in your head wonders if this is the meal that finally introduces you to medieval stomach ailments. Of course, food isn't just for eating, it's for show. Every meal is a chance for the kitchen to show off, the nobles to curry favour, and the entire court to judge your reactions. You're offered strange new foods to display your open-mindedness, or lack of political enemies. Turning down a dish can be a diplomatic incident. Praising the wrong cook can lead to rivalry, tears, or someone sending you a gift pie with a passive-aggressive note. In between the anxiety, there are moments of genuine joy. A sweetmeat that actually is sweet. A roast so tender you almost forgive the chef for last week's salted eel disaster. But mostly, you eat with caution, balancing your hunger against your survival instincts. After all, the only thing tougher than surviving court politics is surviving court dinner. At the end of every meal, you thank the heavens, your taste testers, and your own resilient digestive system. Because for a medieval queen, dinner isn't just a meal, it's a test, a spectacle, and, sometimes, a near-death experience served on a very fancy plate. Baths are rare, and when you do bathe, it's an event involving buckets, servants, and water that was cleaned sometime last week. Perfume is not a luxury, it's a survival tool. For a medieval queen, getting clean is more ceremony than self-care. A rare, almost superstitious ritual that takes as much coordination as a minor military campaign. You'd think royalty would come with at least a bathtub that didn't creak or leak. But alas, the royal bath is a glorified barrel, perched in the center of your freezing bedchamber, and surrounded by a crowd of helpers who can't decide if they're here to assist or just critique your elbows. First, the logistics. Water is fetched from the well or river, carried in heavy wooden buckets by red-faced servants, and set by the fire to warm, slowly, painfully, and never quite enough. While you wait, there's a lively debate about the benefits of bathing. Does it make you healthy? Or invite disease straight through your newly opened pores? Half the court physicians insist that dirt protects you from illness. So cleanliness is, ironically, seen as somewhat dangerous. You know you've made it in life when your biggest health risk is getting too clean. When the water's finally ready, it's poured into the tub, a process that's less elegant than you'd like. One wrong move, and you're ankle deep in what feels like yesterday's soup. Privacy, as always, is a myth. A phalanx of maids stands by, ready to scrub, rinse, and report any moles or freckles to the royal physician, who'll spend the next week speculating about their political significance. You step gingerly into the bath, bracing yourself for either a frigid shock or an accidental scalding. Medieval temperature control is an adventure. Parts of your body will be boiling, while your knees freeze in the open air. Soap exists, but it's basically a chunk of lye and sand mixed with faint hope and last year's herbs. You rub it on and try not to think about all the layers of royal history you're peeling away, plus whatever that mysterious green stuff is under your fingernails. A bath is a spectacle. The entire event is accompanied by running commentary. Which oils to use: olive if you're lucky, goose fat if you're not, what herbs should be sprinkled for spiritual cleanliness, and whether singing a hymn helps remove evil spirits. You catch a glimpse of your own reflection in a bucket and realize you look less like a queen and more like a mildly distressed radish. Rinsing off is yet another group effort. Servants pour jug after jug of tepid water over you while you clutch a towel and try to maintain an air of dignity. The cold rush nearly knocks the crown off your head. Drying off involves rough linen towels that feel like sandpaper and probably double as weapons in times of siege. But the real fun starts after the bath, when the entire castle knows you've just washed. The scent of herbs and soap wafts down the corridors, and suddenly every cousin, courtier, and busybody is dropping by to see how you're feeling. They're not really interested in your well-being, they're here for the spectacle. Did the queen faint from cleanliness? Is she suddenly prone to fits of sneezing? Did her hair change colour? You can almost hear the gossip swirling before you've even put your shift back on. Of course, you can't bathe every day, not unless you want a reputation for extravagance, madness, or both. So between washes, you rely on perfume, strong, floral, and applied in defensive quantities. You dab it behind your ears, on your wrists, and under the chin for good measure. Some days, you catch yourself wondering if the bottle is half rosewater, half medieval panic. Ultimately, being a clean queen is a balancing act. Bathe too often, and you risk social, and possibly actual, death. Not enough, and you blend right in with the stable boys. So you do what all medieval queens do. You walk the fragrant line between decency and disaster, hoping that today's bath was enough to survive tomorrow's rumours, and that at the end of it all, at least you smell like lavender instead of last week's turnip stew. Feel a headache coming on? Prepare for bloodletting mysterious powders and someone insisting you swallow a live spider for luck. Medical privacy does not exist, and your aches are now public business. As queen, you can't so much as sneeze without triggering a full-scale medical incident. The minute you so much as touch your forehead or wince at the wrong time, half the castle mobilizes. The royal physician is summoned at lightning speed, trailed by a motley assortment of herbalists, monks, and well-meaning relatives eager to share the latest folk remedy they heard about in the kitchens. You're instantly transformed from sovereign ruler to communal science experiment. The castle's approach to medicine is creative. Diagnoses are based on your humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Feeling tired? You have too much black bile. Moody? That's an excess of yellow bile. Basically, your body is a cauldron of invisible fluids, and the solution is always to drain, purge, or balance you back to health. Your medical chart might as well be a cookbook. No illness is ever a private matter. The royal physician arrives with great ceremony, loudly declaring your symptoms to anyone within earshot. You're poked, prodded, and interrogated. Did you eat too many pears? Have you seen a suspicious-looking toad? Are you perhaps possessed by melancholy? The king gets involved, then the council, then, inevitably, the clergy, just in case this is a punishment from above and not the after-effects of that questionable meat pie. Bloodletting is the cure-all of the era. Out come the leeches, wriggling, slimy, and far too enthusiastic about their job. If it's not leeches, it's a dull knife and a bowl, with your ladies-in-waiting standing by to catch you if you swoon. If you're lucky, the leeches are at least warmed up first. If not, well, you develop a strong appreciation for cold, clammy hugs. Herbal remedies are a staple. Powders and potions made from roots, moss, and whatever the apothecary scraped off the castle wall are brewed into concoctions guaranteed to taste worse than the disease itself. Sometimes you're given a tonic so potent your eyebrows sweat. Other times, the local wise woman is called in, offering charms made of dried frog legs or a necklace of garlic for general protection. There's always someone eager to sprinkle holy water on your feet or burn a sprig of rosemary over your head, just in case your headache is actually the work of an ambitious imp. No matter the affliction, prayer is prescribed liberally. The chaplain drops by for a bedside confession, anointing your forehead and mumbling a string of Latin that may or may not be a recipe for a very bland stew. Your spiritual health is treated with the same seriousness as your physical state, just in case divine intervention is more effective than another round of goose grease ointment. All the while, news of your condition spreads like wildfire. The entire court speculates wildly. Has the queen caught a fever? Is she with child? Is it an omen, a curse, or simply indigestion from last night's eel pie? Every passing servant offers advice, and if you dare rise from bed too soon, someone will chase you down with a hot compress or a prayer card. Should you actually recover, the credit is distributed with medieval fairness. The physician claims his powder worked, the monk praises the power of prayer, the cook insists it was her restorative broth, and your mother-in-law quietly thanks her favorite relic. Should you fail to recover quickly, the rumors spiral out of control, and soon every goat in the kingdom is said to be suffering in sympathy. In truth, falling ill as a queen means surrendering both your body and your dignity to the whims of medieval medicine. You develop a sense of humor, a strong stomach, and a deep appreciation for modern antibiotics, assuming you make it through the week without another round of leeches or an emergency confession. In the Middle Ages, your best hope for survival isn't the castle's doctor, it's luck, a sturdy constitution, and the ability to look convincingly grateful as you swallow yet another miracle spider. Your smile is your greatest weapon, and you'll need it for endless negotiations, peace talks, and dinners, where you're not allowed to mention you hate the soup. Being a medieval queen is less about luxury and more about the fine, daily art of keeping everyone just happy enough not to revolt. Diplomacy isn't something you practice once a year at a grand summit. It's your full-time job, and the stakes are always terrifyingly high. You must wield your smile like a sword, careful, polished, and sharp enough to cut tension without drawing blood. The only problem is that, unlike a sword, a smile must stay in place for hours at a time, even when all you want to do is hurl your goblet out the window and take up goat herding. Let's start with the royal dining table, where alliances are won and lost over roast meats and slightly burnt bread. Every meal is a minefield of etiquette and double meanings. You're expected to greet visiting lords with perfect politeness, even if you know they spent the morning spreading rumors about your last hairdo. You listen to endless toasts, pretending the wine isn't sour, and compliment every dish, even the ones that taste like boiled shoe leather. If the soup is especially questionable, you simply smile harder, as if you're savoring the world's most subtle flavor profile. Remember, queens don't gag. They appreciate the complexity. Then come the peace talks, those hours-long sessions where you sit perfectly still while mustachioed ambassadors argue about the correct placement of a fence, the legitimacy of a sheep, or whether your cousin's wedding gift was an intentional insult. Your role is to nod, interject with calming words, and maintain a diplomatic poker face even when you're fairly certain everyone at the table would benefit from a timeout and a strong drink. If you're lucky, the arguments are just about sheep. If you're not, the fate of two countries hinges on whether you can outmaneuver a duke with a grudge and a very loud opinion about trade tariffs. Negotiations are always delicate. One misplaced comment, one raised eyebrow, and you might accidentally start a feud that lasts generations. You become fluent in a dozen ways to say how interesting while meaning please stop talking. Sometimes your only weapon is silence. Let your opponent ramble on until they tie themselves in knots, and then rescue the conversation with a well-timed, gracious nod. But diplomacy isn't limited to nobles and foreign dignitaries. The real work happens every day with your own court, smoothing over jealousies, settling disputes about who gets the good seat at chapel, and soothing the ego of the bard whose latest poem about your beauty rhymed queen with bean. Every compliment you give is calculated. Every smile you bestow is carefully rationed. You must always appear above the fray, yet warm enough that people trust your judgment. Otherwise, the court fractures faster than a stale pie crust. It's not all formal wear and banquet halls either. Sometimes, your diplomatic skills are needed in the garden, chatting with nervous gardeners about whose turn it is to trim the topiary, or in the stables, diffusing tension between squabbling stable boys. Even your private walks are public events, an opportunity for the nobility to jockey for favour, peasants to petition for mercy, and everyone else to see if you'll slip and tumble into the fountain. You learn to read a room in seconds. Who's angry? Who's plotting? Who's just hungry and taking it out on the cutlery? Over time, you develop a sixth sense for brewing storms, both political and emotional. And always you keep smiling. Even when the tension makes your jaw ache. Even when the conversation turns to subjects you'd rather discuss with a pack of wild boars. At the end of the day, diplomacy is exhausting. It's pretending your feet don't hurt, your patience isn't thin, and your inner monologue isn't screaming. It's knowing that, for all the silk gowns and sparkling crowns, your real power lies in your ability to convince everyone that tomorrow will be just a little bit better, if only because you'll still be here, smiling through gritted teeth and keeping the peace one strained compliment at a time. Every sibling, cousin, and in-law is plotting something. Family gatherings are less wholesome fun and more live-action chess game with actual consequences. Being queen means your family tree is less a comforting set of roots and more an overgrown bramble full of prickly alliances, sticky secrets, and the odd poisonous berry. If you thought your own family holidays were awkward, imagine a reunion where every second cousin is also a potential usurper, and your mother-in-law brings helpful advice wrapped in veiled threats and passive-aggressive prayers. Welcome to the royal family. Population, too many, and every single one wants something. Let's start with your siblings. In theory, they're supposed to have your back. In practice, they're usually busy trying to marry off their children to someone richer, more powerful, or at the very least more attractive than your own. Letters from your sister come loaded with compliments that sound suspiciously like insults. I hear the new portrait of you is quite lifelike. Translates, in royal speak, to I'd like to see that double chin up close. Your brothers, meanwhile, take turns reminding everyone about that one time you fell off a horse, as if it's relevant to foreign policy. Then there are your cousins, a sprawling network of barely remembered names and ever-shifting loyalties. Some are friendly, some are scheming, and all of them are trying to get invited to your next feast so they can talk business under the guise of family bonding. There's always one cousin who arrives unannounced, lingers for months, and leaves only after securing a lucrative marriage alliance or borrowing your best tapestries. You keep a running tally in your head, which cousin owes you money, which one owes you an apology, and which one owes you a really big favor for covering up that unfortunate goat incident. Of course, no discussion of royal family drama would be complete without in-laws. If you're lucky, Your spouse's relatives are only slightly unbearable. If you're not, they're the main source of your daily headaches. The Queen Mother is a master of the art of subtle interrogation, and the uncles and aunts show up for every event, eager to share their opinions about court fashion, statecraft, and how you're definitely raising your children the wrong way. Every feast turns into a political summit, and every christening into a competition for who can give the most elaborate and completely useless gift. Family gatherings? Less a chance for bonding, more a battlefield with better food. The seating chart alone is a work of political strategy. Who sits next to whom, who gets the seat farthest from the fire, and who is strategically placed to overhear gossip but not start it. Toasts are minefields of double meanings, and polite conversation is peppered with references to last year's scandal, or, if you're really lucky, next year's blackmail. Every day is another round of guess who's plotting now. Someone is always spreading rumors, angling for an inheritance, or leaking information to foreign courts. You're forced to smile through it all, even when you'd rather banish half the family to a monastery. You learn the art of coded language, complimenting your sister-in-law's embroidery while quietly hinting she might want to stop poisoning the royal pigeons. If you ever think you're finally free from the drama, think again. A surprise visit, a mysterious gift, or a sudden illness in the family can kick off a fresh round of intrigue. Holidays and celebrations are especially fraught. Nothing says festive like wondering whether your cousin's gift basket is booby-trapped or just full of turnips. And yet somehow you survive. You adapt to the drama, outmaneuver the schemers, and keep your wits sharp. In the end, being a queen in a royal family isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about learning to dance in a room full of knives and smiling while you do it. You may never have a normal family dinner, but at least your life is never, ever boring. The jester's main job is to keep you from losing your mind. Sometimes he succeeds. Sometimes you wonder if he's secretly a spy or just high on fermented turnip juice. Being queen means that the court jester is both your daily dose of comic relief and your most unpredictable source of stress. Sure, he's supposed to lighten the atmosphere, juggle a few apples, and poke fun at the nobles, but his true skill is treading the razor's edge between hilarity and outright insubordination. You never quite know if he's about to recite a clever limerick or unleash a satirical barb about the king's thinning hair right in front of the king. The jester is always there, popping out from behind curtains, under tables, or occasionally from inside a barrel, all in the name of entertainment. His jokes range from genuinely funny to mildly alarming. One minute he's impersonating the bishop's lisp, the next he's balancing a live chicken on his head while whistling the royal anthem. Laughter is the best medicine, they say, but you're starting to wonder if your jester is secretly prescribing stress with a side of giggles. At feasts, the jester is a welcome distraction from the endless parades of slightly overcooked meat and undercooked political conversations. He teases the courtiers, lampoons your rivals, and makes the peasants roar with laughter, sometimes at your expense. When he starts poking fun at your in-laws or recounting the time you tripped on your train in front of the Duke of whatever, you have to laugh, because everyone else is watching to see if you do. Court etiquette dictates that you laugh first and loudest, or risk looking humorless, a fate worse than bad hair. Of course, every joke is a little test. The jester's barbs are as much a social barometer as they are entertainment. If you take offense, word spreads fast. If you laugh too hard, people wonder if you're hiding something. The best jesters have a sixth sense for who can handle a joke and who might order them thrown into the moat. You develop a similar skill, learning which jokes to ignore, which to encourage, and which to file away as possible evidence in the next court scandal. Some days, the jester is your only ally. He's the one person who can say out loud what everyone else is only whispering. He'll make fun of the chamberlain's obsession with scented candles or the bishop's odd choice in hats. Other days you suspect he's collecting secrets. After all, no one listens more closely than a fool with nothing to lose and everything to gain. He hears everything: the servants gossiping, the nobles scheming, the king snoring during council meetings. Sometimes you catch the jester watching you with a knowing look, one eyebrow raised as if to say, "Yes, I know exactly what's going on, but I'll keep it to myself for now." And then there are the times when the jester's comedy gets a little too close to home. Maybe he makes a crack about the lack of an heir, or hints at the queen's rumoured fondness for spiced wine. It's awkward, but it's also a relief. At least someone is saying what everyone else is thinking. You give him a half smile and hope the courtiers chalk up your blush to candlelight. Behind the painted smile and the jingling bells, the jester is a reminder of the thin line between power and powerlessness. He's a mirror, reflecting the court's anxieties, dreams, and ridiculousness back at itself. Some queens befriend their jesters, others keep them at arm's length, but everyone agrees the court would be far duller and far more dangerous without that unpredictable streak of laughter running through its halls. And as you fall asleep to the faint sound of the jester practicing animal noises outside your door, you realize sometimes the only thing holding this entire castle together is one fool with a sharp tongue, a quick wit, and absolutely no filter. Daily prayers, mandatory mass, and frequent reminders that hell is a lot warmer than your castle in February. Sin is everywhere, and so is your confessor. For a medieval queen, faith is as woven into daily life as the scratchy wool of your undergarments, and often just as uncomfortable. Religion is less a source of personal comfort, and more an ongoing performance, an endless series of rituals you must uphold to maintain your reputation, protect the realm, and hopefully keep your soul off the express train to eternal damnation. The day begins before sunrise with the bell for matins, which is basically a group yawn in the direction of the Lord. Even before you've had a bite to eat, you're hustled into the chapel, wrapped in blankets and piety, to mumble prayers with the priests, monks, and an impressive collection of royal relatives who always seem to be on their best behavior when holy eyes are watching. You're supposed to kneel in silence, reflect on your many sins, and appear devout, while quietly wondering if anyone else noticed the bishop just nodded off mid-psalm. Breakfast is followed by another round of prayers, just in case you sinned by having impure thoughts about the porridge. Throughout the day, there are more services: noon prayers, afternoon devotions, evening vespers, and a flurry of Hail Marys every time someone stubs a toe, sneezes, or forgets to bow before passing the relic cabinet. It's religion as cardio, constant up, down, kneel, stand, and cross yourself, like the world's holiest aerobics class. Confession is a regular event, not just for spiritual cleansing, but as a kind of medieval background check. The royal confessor is everywhere, hovering outside your chamber, lurking in the corridor, or just happening to stroll through the gardens when you're in need of a good wallow in guilt. He wants to hear all about your doubts, your envy, your momentary temptation to push the seneschal into the moat. There are no secrets from the confessor, and he will kindly remind you of this whenever you try to get away with "I don't remember anything sinful this week." Faith isn't just about personal salvation. It's the backbone of your political life. Every major event is accompanied by blessings and ceremonies: births, marriages, treaties, hunts, and even new wardrobe unveilings. May God protect you from moths and bad tailoring. You're expected to fund monasteries, sponsor feast days, and donate enough to the local church that the windows practically glow with guilt. If you miss a service, everyone notices. If you attend too many, people start whispering about whether you've committed a particularly juicy sin. Religious fear is a constant companion. Every thunderstorm is a potential sign of God's wrath. Every poor harvest might mean you forgot to light the right candle or gave the wrong offering. Your dreams are analysed for holy messages. Last night's vision of flying pigs might be a warning to spend more on alms or just eat less cheese before bed. The line between faith and superstition is razor thin, and you're expected to walk it with absolute conviction. Of course, the clergy are not above playing politics. The bishop occasionally forgets your contribution envelope, then brings it up pointedly at dinner. The abbot delivers sermons on humility right after receiving his annual shipment of fine Bordeaux. You smile serenely, nod devoutly, and pray silently for the patience to get through yet another sermon about the dangers of vanity, while wearing a crown that could anchor a small fishing boat. Yet through all the rituals, guilt, and holy headaches, faith is a genuine comfort, at least sometimes. The familiar pattern of prayers offers moments of peace, and the cathedral's candlelight is almost magical, flickering over stone saints and echoing with the voices of centuries. You learn to take what solace you can from the rituals, finding meaning in the repetition and hope in the promises. In the end, being a queen means carrying the weight of the world, your crown, and your own immortal soul. You keep praying, keep confessing, and keep hoping that one day heaven will be as warm as promised, and that you won't have to spend eternity explaining why you secretly hated that one hymn everyone else loved. You're never alone, not even in the bathroom. The guards are here to protect you, but mostly they just make everything awkward. Ah, the Royal Guard, a living wall of chainmail and suspicion, forever stationed between you and the outside world, and sometimes between you and your own peace of mind. In theory, they're here to keep you safe from assassins, over-enthusiastic peasants, and the occasional rampaging swan. In practice, they're the reason you haven't had a moment of genuine privacy since the day you put on the crown. From the moment you open your eyes in the morning, the guards are already at their posts, standing at attention in the hallway, their armor clinking ominously like a warning bell. Any hope you had of slipping out for a quiet stroll in the gardens is dashed by the heavy footfalls that echo behind you, broadcasting your location to everyone within earshot. Even when you retreat to your own chambers, their presence lingers, a constant reminder that someone, somewhere, is always watching, just in case you spontaneously decide to commit treason between your second breakfast and noon prayers. Bathroom breaks? Forget any illusions you might have about alone time. There's always a guard lurking just outside the door, presumably ready to leap to your rescue if you're attacked by a particularly vengeful towel. The sound of shifting boots and muffled coughs is your soundtrack, and if you linger too long, someone might knock to check on your welfare. In the rare moments you do catch a sliver of solitude, it feels like a tiny rebellion, a few precious seconds of unobserved existence before the next security sweep. Security, after all, is no joke. Every visitor is announced with elaborate formality, and every package is inspected by at least 3 people, one of whom definitely thinks your new slippers are suspicious. Your mail is screened, your food is tasted, and even your bouquets are sniffed for hidden threats. Nothing says romance like a guard upending a vase of lilies just in case someone's hidden a tiny crossbow in the arrangement. Your personal guard is a permanent fixture, following you from throne room to chapel, from feast to garden, from bedroom to council chamber. They're trained to be both invisible and omnipresent, which mostly translates to standing very still and making everyone uncomfortable. You can't have a candid conversation, a private cry, or even a good daydream without wondering if someone is eavesdropping from behind a tapestry. Sometimes, the only way to have a secret is to write it down, roll it up, and feed it to the royal lapdog. Social life under surveillance is an acquired taste. Courtiers measure their words carefully, knowing the guards are always within earshot. Would-be suitors are scrutinized so thoroughly you half expect the guards to start demanding family trees and references. Even your friends, the ones who remember you before you were queen, are cautious. Gossip thrives on the assumption that the guard heard everything, and frankly, it's probably true. Ironically, the more protected you are, the more isolated you feel. Safety has its price: spontaneity, privacy, and any hope of sneaking out to enjoy a market festival in disguise. The guards don't mean to be intrusive, at least not all of them, but their job is to keep you alive and unassassinated, no matter how much it cramps your style. Still, the Queen's Guard is not without its uses. When an overeager noble corners you with another tedious story about their pet goat, a subtle glance at your captain of the guard is all it takes to orchestrate a timely rescue. If there's a riot in the kitchens or a bat in the belfry, the guards are the first on the scene, swords drawn and ready for action, even if the action is just chasing a chicken out of the pantry. At the end of the day, you appreciate their vigilance. Maybe you even learn a few of their names, or at least their nicknames: Sir Snoops, Lady Coughs-a-Lot, and the Shadow. You understand the necessity of all the protocol, the locked doors, and the awkward hovering. Because in the Middle Ages, the line between protected and prisoner can be as thin as a velvet curtain, and your guards are the only thing standing between you and a kingdom's worth of trouble, even if they do hear every single one of your sighs. You have a lapdog with a better diet than most peasants, and a swan that may or may not be plotting your downfall. Nothing says power like being nibbled by a royal ferret during council meetings. Royal pets in the Middle Ages are less adorable family members and more tiny agents of chaos, wrapped in fur and feathers. As queen, you're never alone, not because of guards or courtiers, but because at least 3 animals are lurking somewhere under your skirts, atop your shoulder, or trailing you with a suspiciously knowing gaze. Pets are everywhere, and each comes with its own blend of charm, status, and occasionally scandal. Let's start with the lapdog, a fluffy ball of entitlement that spends its days curled up on the warmest cushions and snacking on roasted pigeon, poached quail eggs, and, when you're feeling especially generous, the odd scrap of royal venison. Its wardrobe is more fashionable than half the court, complete with bejeweled collars and a selection of tiny cloaks. Of course, the lapdog's loyalty is conditional. It will defend you from shadows and shoe buckles, but will desert you instantly for a slice of cheese from the steward's table. Despite its size, this dog can start palace-wide drama just by yapping at the wrong noble or, worse, peeing on the bishop's shoe during mass. Then there's the royal swan, a majestic creature gliding around the moat with a neck longer than your patience. It is beautiful, it is elegant, and it is plotting something, at least according to castle gossip. Servants claim it can tell the future, courtiers believe it has a secret stash of keys, and at least one chronicler suspects the swan is the true power behind the throne. Mostly it just hisses at anyone who approaches your window and once tried to chase the jester out of the garden, becoming an accidental court hero. No medieval castle is complete without its flock of birds, falcons, doves, and the occasional peacock. Falconry is the ultimate status symbol. Never mind that you have no idea how to put on a falconer's glove without nearly losing a finger. The birds themselves are equal parts regal and unhinged, flying off at inopportune moments, refusing to return, and sometimes deciding to nap on the head of visiting ambassadors. Still, a queen with a falcon is seen as powerful, mysterious, and perhaps just a little unhinged herself. And then there's the royal ferret, nimble, mischievous, and forever plotting its next heist. The ferret has a habit of escaping during council meetings and surfacing precisely when someone is trying to impress you. Its favorite snack is whatever you're eating, and its favorite activity is unraveling the hem of your most expensive gown. It's impossible to look dignified when a ferret is dangling from your sleeve, but you try, because nothing terrifies nobles quite like the queen who laughs at her own ferret. The castle cats are another story entirely. Every cat in the kingdom knows where the best sunbeam is, which servant will slip them cream, and how to look supremely indifferent to royal decrees. Cats keep the mice, and the occasional rat-sized spider, at bay. But they also inspire rumours, especially when they disappear for days, only to return looking smug and slightly mysterious. Some whisper the cats are witches' familiars, others say they're just after the cheese in the larder. Either way, you secretly admire their independence and wish you could vanish under a bed whenever the court minstrel picks up his lute. Of course, animals at court aren't just for companionship, they're a source of constant drama. The dog dislikes the ferret steals the cat's spot, and the peacock screams every time anyone approaches the privy. Occasionally, an animal's antics are enough to derail an entire council session, as when the dog ate an important treaty or the swan blocked the drawbridge for an afternoon, demanding tribute in stale bread. Still, there are moments of real comfort. A warm purr in your lap, a gentle nuzzle, a momentary escape from the human madness. Animals offer unconditional affection, or at least indifference, and they don't care if you're wearing yesterday's wimple or this year's hottest shade of blue. In a world of courtly intrigue and constant surveillance, your animal companions are sometimes the only beings you can trust, even if the swan is definitely up to something. Strolling the grounds sounds nice, until you realize the fresh air is mostly manure and moat funk. There's mud everywhere, and you're definitely going to step in something unfortunate. As queen, you're supposed to radiate health and vigor, which means you're expected to take the air whether you want to or not. The romantic idea of wandering through flower-strewn gardens is a lot less appealing when the first thing you see out the door is a goose fight and the second thing you smell is not roses. The medieval castle courtyard is a wild ecosystem where livestock, gardeners, and guards all compete for the same 10 square feet of soggy earth. Let's talk about the castle gardens. The word garden is being generous. Think tangled hedges, a few suspiciously scraggly herbs, and a pond that may or may not double as a toad sanctuary. If you want to enjoy a quiet moment by the lilies, prepare to share it with a colony of bees and at least one over-enthusiastic gardener who insists on narrating the life cycle of every cabbage within earshot. The herb patch is the pride of the kitchen staff, who jealously guard their mint and parsley, occasionally fending off thieves with threats and, once, a well-aimed onion. You're supposed to glide serenely along the gravel paths, nodding to the peasants and breathing in the invigorating air. Reality check. You're mostly dodging puddles, livestock droppings, and the aforementioned goose, which has declared war on your slippers. Mud is everywhere, on your hem, your shoes, your personal dignity. No one wants to admit it, but the castle's true enemy is not foreign invaders or ambitious uncles. It's the omnipresent, soul-sucking muck. And then there's the moat. In theory, it's a mighty defensive feature. In reality, it's a stagnant moat soup, thick with algae, ancient fish, and the occasional lost chamber pot. On hot days, the aroma drifts through the castle like a particularly aggressive curse, settling in your hair and reminding you that medieval sanitation is just a suggestion. Sometimes the swans look at you with the haunted eyes of birds who have seen too much. But it's not all doom and stench. Sometimes the sun manages to break through the clouds, the wind blows the right way, and the court musicians are too busy napping to follow you with lutes. On these rare afternoons, you find a quiet bench, or at least a dryish stump, and pretend, just for a moment, that you're a character in a tapestry, untouched by mud and politics. You listen to the distant laughter of children, the lowing of cows, and the slightly less romantic squelch of someone losing a shoe to the bog. Outdoor events are part of the job too. Spring festivals, maypole dances, and harvest feasts all require your presence, your smile, and your ability to pretend you don't notice when the Lord Mayor's wig is attacked by sparrows. Your dress will inevitably collect half the kingdom's soil, and at least one local dignitary will try to impress you with an ancient tradition that mostly involves fermented turnips and awkward singing. Of course, every outing comes with an entourage. Servants trail after you with baskets and towels, guards march along looking for trouble, or maybe just trying to avoid stepping in anything, and some enterprising cousin always sees your stroll as the perfect opportunity to discuss marriage alliances or pig-related grievances. Privacy, even in the garden, is a mirage. Yet despite the grime, the noise, and the constant threat of animal ambush, the great outdoors does offer a fleeting sense of escape. It's where you can take a deep breath, squint at the sun, and remind yourself that, mud or no mud, you're still queen. And, when you finally return to the castle, you bring with you not just dirty shoes, but a renewed appreciation for walls, floors, and the art of closing the door on the wild medieval world outside. Your portrait is being painted, your hair is doing its own thing, and you're stuck looking noble while a pigeon poops outside the window. This image will last for centuries, and you hate every brushstroke. Ah, portrait day, the moment every queen both dreads and cannot escape. Forget the stories about artists capturing your soul. In reality, portrait sittings are less about immortality and more about trying to keep a straight face while your hair rebels and the court painter mutters under his breath about the complex interplay of shadows and dignity. It's hard to look majestic when your fringe has staged a coup and your wimple is sagging like an old bedsheet. You're ushered into the grandest room in the castle, which someone has filled with the scent of wilted lilies and a nervous painter's sweat. The windows are thrown open for natural light, which means you're freezing, and every passing breeze threatens to topple your carefully arranged veil. The court artist, a man with more opinions than teeth, circles you, squinting at your jawline and occasionally flinching at the state of your bangs. The first hour is spent arranging the composition. This mostly involves people moving heavy chairs, arguing about whether you should hold a scepter, a rose, or just your own breath, and adjusting your hair for the 100th time. At least 3 ladies-in-waiting are stationed behind you, trying to smooth rebellious locks into submission with pins, ribbons, and whispered prayers. The effect is somewhere between elegant swan and harried laundress on market day. Just as you think they've finished, a pigeon lands on the windowsill and begins an enthusiastic performance of nature's least dignified ballet. You're supposed to look regal and serene, but it's hard to maintain your composure while dodging bird droppings and pretending you don't hear the painter loudly sighing about divine inspiration. Then comes the posing. You are expected to hold the same posture, chin up, eyes soft, hands delicate, until your limbs turn to stone and your spine begins questioning its life choices. The painter instructs you to look into the distance with the confidence of a queen who's never spilled soup on her gown, which is a tall order for anyone, let alone someone whose skirt is slowly slipping off the stool. Hours pass. Your foot falls asleep, your hair reverts to its natural chaos, and the artist's apprentice keeps dropping brushes on the stone floor. Servants slip in and out with trays of tepid wine and dry biscuits, none of which you're allowed to eat, lest you ruin the angle of your jaw. Somewhere behind you, a page is quietly counting how many times the painter says just a little longer. The tally is already impressive. The worst part? The portrait is meant to outlast you, your children, and probably the entire castle. It will hang in the hall for centuries, inviting future generations to wonder if your left eyebrow really was that skeptical, or if the artist was taking creative revenge for the royal cook's fish surprise. You'd like to request a do-over, but history isn't big on second chances. Of course, the finished product is never quite what you hoped. Maybe the colors are off. Maybe your hair looks like it's auditioning for the role of storm-blown haystack. And maybe your nose is suspiciously reminiscent of your least favorite uncle. Courtiers line up to admire the work, offering praise that sounds like insults. A most commanding likeness, your grace, or how interesting that he captured your unique expression. After the unveiling, the painter is handsomely paid and quietly disappears, leaving you to face eternity with a portrait that will be scrutinized, copied, and occasionally defaced by future generations of bored schoolchildren and rival artists. Your hair, free at last from pins and powder, collapses in exhausted victory. You take one last look at the painting, shrug, and remind yourself, at least the pigeon didn't make it into the final composition. And in the great saga of royal indignities, a bad hair day is just another page in the story, immortalized forever, whether you like it or not. Once the sun goes down, castles turn into echoing, freezing, slightly haunted labyrinths. Every candle flickers, every shadow is suspicious. And the only thing scarier than the dark is what's in the chamber pot. As queen, you'd hope nightfall would be your signal to rest, unwind, and maybe enjoy a moment's peace. Instead, it signals the beginning of medieval survival mode. Castles are picturesque by day, but transform into drafty, dimly lit obstacle courses as soon as dusk creeps over the battlements. The thick stone walls hold the cold like a grudge, and the wind howls through every crack and arrow slit, making you wonder if the castle is actually shivering along with you. Lighting is a luxury. Candles sputter and smoke, torchlight throws grotesque shadows on the walls, and the good lanterns are always mysteriously missing when you need them most. Your only guarantee of illumination is the full moon, unless the sky is cloudy, in which case, good luck finding your slippers or the way to the garderobe. If you need to leave your bedchamber, it becomes an expedition. Grab your cloak, clutch your candle, and shuffle cautiously through corridors where every tapestry suddenly looks like it's hiding a minor demon. The castle after dark is never truly silent. There's the creak of ancient wood, the distant clank of armor as the night guard changes shifts, and the mysterious scratching noises in the walls. It's best not to ask. Add the occasional scream from a startled page who's mistaken a draft for a ghost, and you've got yourself the full haunted house experience, no ticket required. Bedtime routines are elaborate. Your ladies-in-waiting bustle in to close the shutters, lay extra logs on the fire, and pile so many blankets on your bed, you begin to question whether you're sleeping or being slowly smothered for your own good. They check every nook for lurking spiders and make polite but urgent conversation about anything except the mysterious stains on the stonework. You pretend not to notice as someone hastily inspects your mattress for unusual dampness. The less said about castle plumbing, the better. Night is also the realm of the castle's less visible residents, the rodents. No matter how regal you are never above the scurrying company of a mouse or two. If you're lucky, your loyal lapdog will chase them away. If you're not, you'll wake to find tiny paw prints in the remains of your midnight snack, and possibly a mouse sizing up your jewelry box as a new home. And then, of course, there's the chamber pot. A medieval queen's dignity meets its match every time nature calls after dark. The thought of stumbling down 3 flights of icy stone steps to reach the privy is unthinkable, so you accept the porcelain pot with the air of a monarch signing a peace treaty. Just don't look too closely. In the morning, some unlucky servant will deal with the aftermath, armed with an iron constitution and a nose for danger. Yet even with the cold, the shadows, and the occasional scream, there's a strange magic to the castle at night. If you can find a quiet window seat away from the drafts, you can look out over the moonlit courtyard and imagine a different world, one where you're free to walk the battlements, where the castle keeps its secrets, and where you're just another soul searching for warmth in the dark. Eventually, wrapped in layer upon layer of wool and hope, you drift off to sleep to the lullaby of distant wind, crackling fire, and the soft breathing of your guards stationed just outside your door. Castles after dark are not for the faint-hearted, but if you can make it through the night without tripping over a stray cat or getting spooked by your own shadow, you'll wake up ready to do it all over again, facing another royal day, armed with nothing but courage, candle wax, and perhaps a slightly haunted smile. Lying awake, you wonder if all this power is worth the constant stress, paranoia, and mysterious rashes. You count your blessings, your enemies, and the cracks in the ceiling, hoping that tomorrow you'll still have a head to wear the crown on. It's the hour when the castle finally settles, the last echoes of boots and gossip trailing off into cold stone. You're alone, or as alone as a medieval queen ever gets, with only your restless thoughts and the creak of ancient timbers for company. The room is heavy with shadows, the fire reduced to a stubborn glow, and your bed, for all its splendor, feels less like a throne and more like a very elaborate prison. You stare at the dark, feeling every ache in your body, every bruise from ceremonial jewelry, and the strange itch from something that might have crawled out of the rushes or just be another sign of royal stress. With nothing to distract you but your own mind, the questions creep in. Would life be simpler if you'd been born a miller's daughter or a tavern keeper's wife? Would you be happier without the weight of a kingdom balancing on your spine, and without a pack of in-laws plotting your downfall with every overcooked dinner? The crown is heavy, not just on your head, but on your soul. Each privilege comes wrapped in barbed wire, and every luxury is paid for in sleepless nights, and the constant fear that tomorrow's sun will rise on yet another crisis with your name on it. Even the so-called comforts of royalty come at a cost. You can't even eat a meal, take a bath, or sneeze without an audience. And every attempt to carve out a sliver of privacy is thwarted by well-meaning guards, gossipy maids, or the relentless tide of royal responsibilities. Power, they say, is freedom, but here, It feels more like being trapped in a particularly ornate hamster wheel. You roll onto your side, searching the ceiling for distractions, but all you find are the cracks, the silent record of years and storms and endless court intrigue. You count them like worries, running your mind along each jagged line. There's the one that split after your first winter, the tiny web above the door that grew the year of the Great Famine, and the crack shaped like a question mark that keeps getting longer, as if the castle itself is also asking, is this really worth it? And yet, as much as you might long for escape, you know there are things that tether you here. The children who run through your halls, trailing laughter and muddy footprints, the rare moments of quiet in the chapel, when candlelight makes even old stone look soft, the satisfaction of a well-negotiated peace, a letter from home, a feast that ends in true, unforced laughter. You remember, too, the strength of the women who came before you, queens who endured even worse, who managed to keep their kingdoms and their sanity more or less intact. Still, the doubts persist. You think of your enemies, real and imagined, sharpening knives in shadowed corners. You think of every favor you owe, every secret you keep, every alliance held together with a nervous smile and a pinch of luck. The world outside your walls can change. In a heartbeat, war, plague, famine, or just one careless word at court. Tonight, like so many nights, you try to count your blessings, and then your enemies, just to see which list is longer. You hope, as sleep tugs at your eyelids, that tomorrow you'll wake up with the strength to face another day of royal expectations and unpredictable disasters. Because being queen isn't about fairy tales or absolute power. It's about survival of your body, your spirit, and yes, your sense of humor. You hug your blankets a little tighter. Take one last look at the battered old crown on your nightstand and remind yourself, as long as you wake up in the morning and still have your head, you're doing better than most queens in the history books. And that, in the Middle Ages, is as close to happiness as anyone with a crown ever gets. You'd think queens spent their afternoons weaving tapestries of unicorns and plotting world peace, but most of your free time is filled with mandatory embroidery, forced lute lessons, and awkward attempts at falconry. Nothing says me time like accidentally letting a falcon escape, or sewing your sleeve to your own dress while everyone pretends not to notice. Royal downtime is less about relaxation and more about productive leisure, which is medieval for things that sound soothing but are actually stressful, tedious, or quietly humiliating. Your daily calendar allots a precious window for hobbies, but these are rarely chosen by you. Instead, they're recommended, prescribed, or just thrust upon you by well-meaning advisors, eager in-laws, and the occasional overzealous abbess who insists that idle hands invite the devil. Let's start with embroidery, the unofficial sport of queens everywhere. You're handed a hoop, a tangle of coloured threads, and a pattern that somehow involves 20 different types of knot. The goal? Stitch together a tapestry to impress foreign visitors, illustrate Bible stories, or commemorate the last time your husband managed to eat dinner without starting a diplomatic incident. What's advertised as soothing needlework soon becomes an endless trial of patience, eyesight, and finger-pricking pain. No one mentions how often you poke yourself, drop your needle into the rushes, or end up with a half-finished scene that looks more like a tragic chicken accident than the triumph of St. George. Then there's music. The lute, the harp, and, on truly unlucky days, the hurdy-gurdy. If you're tone-deaf, you can expect hours of gently patronizing instruction from the court's most patient musician, who grimaces every time you miss a note but insists you're making progress, your grace. If you ever dreamt of serenading the garden at dusk, reality checks in the form of creaky strings and the unsettling certainty that somewhere, someone is keeping a running tally of how many times you've hit the wrong chord. When you finally perform for the court, your audience claps with that enthusiastic politeness usually reserved for disaster survivors and small children in school plays. Falconry. the ultimate royal pastime, is supposed to show off your poise and control. In practice, it's more likely to showcase your lack of upper body strength and your inability to convince a bird of prey to return with anything except dirty looks. The falcon is beautiful, haughty, and wholly uninterested in cooperating with the queen. If you manage not to get scratched, pecked, or tangled in the leash, you're having a good day. If the falcon actually catches something, you get a round of applause and the privilege of standing very still while the bird dismembers its lunch on your best gloves. Sometimes you're encouraged to take up quiet reading, as long as it's scripture, chronicles of saints, or improving literature that won't scandalize the bishop. If you try to sneak in a romance, the book mysteriously vanishes from your bedchamber, only to reappear on the chaplain's desk with a bookmark at the acceptable chapters. Even your personal diary is fair game for nosy courtiers, and the occasional poetic scribe hoping to immortalize your inner torment in the next ballad. Painting is another recommended pursuit. The royal art instructor sets up a still life, apples, flowers, sometimes a slightly alarmed pigeon, and gently corrects your technique as you struggle to capture the spirit of the subject. You finish with green apples, blue flowers, and a pigeon that looks ready to unionize. Even relaxation comes with company. Every hobby is observed, commented on, and, inevitably, judged. Your attempts at me time are shared with ladies-in-waiting, tutors, and that one cousin who's always just passing through when you're at your most distracted. Solitude is a rumor, and privacy is the punchline. Still, you keep going, because royal hobbies, ridiculous as they are, offer a tiny taste of normal life. And if you manage to finish a tapestry without sewing yourself to the drapes, play a song that doesn't clear the room, or bring back the falcon with all your fingers intact, it's a small victory. In a world where every moment is scheduled, scrutinized, and reported, even a few awkward stitches and off-key notes count as freedom, and that, for a medieval queen, is a rare and precious thing. Every morning brings a stack of letters, half are marriage proposals for your children, a quarter are political threats disguised as compliments, and the rest are invitations to banquets you absolutely do not want to attend. Dictating polite replies while your scribe tries to spell your most humble servant for the 5th time is somehow both an art form and a test of your will to live. As queen, you might have imagined correspondence as an opportunity for romance or intrigue, a delicate exchange of secrets with foreign monarchs, or perhaps the odd poetic billet doux from an anonymous admirer. In reality, it's closer to running the kingdom's worst post office, with you as the only overworked, underappreciated clerk. Your mornings begin with the sound of parchment flapping and the sighs of your long-suffering scribe who, for reasons unknown, cannot spell sovereign the same way twice. First, you tackle the proposals. Every lord with a surplus of eligible offspring believes his child is the answer to your dynasty's prayers. You receive portraits, some flattering, most alarmingly accurate. The artists are generous with hair and teeth, but less so with personality. Each letter describes the candidate's virtues: strong chin, hearty appetite, only cries on feast days, and hints at the family's strategic lands. You're expected to reply gracefully, no matter how dreadful the prospect of attending another betrothal feast with boiled turnip as the main course. Next come the diplomatic missives, which are rarely as friendly as they sound. With utmost respect and devotion to your grace, usually means I am about to demand a raise in taxes, threaten war, or blame you for the bishop's gout. The art of reading between the lines becomes second nature. A letter praising your recent portrait is probably a veiled warning that the sender has seen the latest court scandal. Flattery is suspect, and anything written in Latin is guaranteed to contain at least one ominous proverb about snakes in the grass. A good quarter of the correspondence is pure social obligation. Invitations to banquets, hunts, and weddings in far-flung corners of the realm. You read them with mounting dread. Each event requires a reply, a gift, and often a solid excuse not to attend. After all, you can only fake a cold so many times before people suspect you're either terminally ill or secretly attending every party in disguise. You have perfected the gracious regret, a masterpiece of words that says, "Thank you, but I would rather be cleaning the moat with my own toothbrush." There are love notes too, some sweet, some strange, all fraught with peril. A note slipped into a book from a nervous young poet, a coded message from a neighboring queen seeking advice, even the odd fan letter from a troubadour who probably just wants a job. Each one is carefully catalogued and, if necessary, destroyed by your most trusted maid. You quickly learn the importance of plausible deniability. Then there are the threats, some overt, some disguised as compliments. May your kingdom continue to thrive, just not more than mine. We look forward to your support. Or else. Occasionally, a letter arrives bearing wax seals, curses, or once a slightly suspicious feather. Your guard inspects everything for poison, and your confessor reads the rest for signs of heresy, so you never quite get a moment alone with your own mail. Dictating replies is a ritual in itself. You pace the chamber, choosing your words carefully, while your scribe dutifully mangles the spelling of every other name and title. Your most humble and obedient servant becomes your most humble and obedient servant, and you wonder if perhaps he's doing it on purpose. Some days, you just want to send a reply that says, "No thank you. Please stop writing, ever." Despite the tedium, correspondence is your window to the world. The gossip, the alliances, the undercurrents of power. It's exhausting and absurd, but also strangely satisfying when you finally sign off for the day. You seal each letter with a drop of wax, a silent wish, and the unshakable hope that tomorrow's post will bring something, anything, better than another invitation to dinner with the Duke of Onion Soup. Every day, someone gives you something, flowers, rare birds, or baskets of something that is either cheese or a new form of blackmail. You have to smile, act delighted, and figure out which gifts are actually safe to touch, eat, or display, without accidentally triggering a minor international incident. Being queen means living in a never-ending episode of medieval show and tell. Each morning, as you navigate the minefield of royal duties, you're confronted by a veritable parade of courtiers, local officials, distant cousins, and enthusiastic tradesmen, all bearing gifts, and not a single one of them does it purely out of generosity. The castle storerooms bulge with mystery parcels, baskets, and ornate boxes, each one demanding a reaction, a thank you note, and, occasionally, a personal taster to check for hidden daggers or, worse, questionable pickled fish. The art of receiving gifts is one of the most complex dances in the Queen's repertoire. You're expected to be gracious, effusive, and convincingly pleased, no matter what's actually in the box. A wilted bouquet from the mayor's wife? How charming. A cage of songbirds from a baron you're fairly certain once tried to poison your uncle. Such beautiful creatures, I'm sure they'll brighten the aviary. A mysterious cheese from a duchess with a known grudge? Ah, what a unique aroma. And let's be honest, it's rarely just about the gift. Every offering is loaded with meaning, alliances, and more often than not, expectations. A rare tapestry from a foreign envoy isn't just home decor, it's an unspoken negotiation. Accept it too eagerly, and you've just agreed to support their next border dispute. Display it in a place of honor, and your own nobles will grumble that you're playing favorites. Refuse it, and you risk offending a family who holds half the wheat supply. No pressure. Of course, there are the edible gifts. Cakes, preserves, spiced nuts, and enough candied fruit to keep the kingdom's dentists busy for generations. Before anything touches your lips, it's inspected, sniffed, and sometimes sacrificially sampled by a very nervous food taster. Poisoning a queen through a sweet treat is the oldest trick in the book, but so is bribing her with a delicacy you can't get anywhere else. Sometimes you stare at a pie and try to remember whether the sender is more likely to offer a marriage alliance or a migraine. Animal gifts are another matter entirely. Hawks, hounds, ferrets, and, on one memorable occasion, a goat in a velvet cloak. You smile, pet the creature, and make a mental note to ask the steward which wing of the castle is now doubling as a petting zoo. There's a running tally among your ladies in waiting. Which animal will bite a diplomat first? Which one will escape and turn up in the treasury? You'd re-gift them, but last time you tried, it sparked a minor scandal that took 3 banquets and a poetry contest to smooth over. Then there are the bribes, which everyone pretends are just very generous gifts. A golden goblet slipped to your chamberlain, an anonymous pouch of coins tucked into the chapel offering a suspiciously generous donation to your favorite convent. The line between present and payoff is thinner than your patience after the 3rd basket of questionable cheese. Refuse too bluntly, and you risk being labelled ungrateful. Accept too warmly, and suddenly everyone wants to know what the Queen will do for them. It's a delicate balancing act, requiring an iron stomach, a velvet smile, and the memory of an elephant. You keep careful records, who sent what, when, and what awkward request followed. Your rooms fill up with bizarre treasures, a gilded lute you can't play, a cloak so heavy it's best used as a doorstop, and enough scented candles to ward off the entire kingdom's plague outbreaks. Despite the risks and the relentless pageantry, there are moments of genuine delight. A hand-carved comb from a peasant child, a rare flower grown just for you, or a letter of thanks from someone whose life you unknowingly made better. These you treasure quietly, tucked among the endless formalities. Because in the great game of gifts and bribes, it's not about what you receive, it's about how you respond, how you keep the peace, and how, sometimes, you manage to find a real smile amid the endless parade of unique cheeses and dangerously well-dressed goats. So here we are, finally sinking back onto our own pillows after a day in the pointy shoes of a medieval queen. You've survived breakfast under suspicion, being dressed by committee, 100 icy drafts, family intrigue, and at least 2 near-fatal doses of political gossip. You've smiled through feasts where every bite could be your last, played chess with relatives who'd rather checkmate your whole existence, and tried not to sneeze in front of the bishop. If you made it through without a leeching, an exorcism, or a scandal, congratulations, your crown is probably crooked, but your sense of humour is intact. As you drift off tonight, take a moment to be grateful for every modern luxury within arm's reach. Indoor plumbing, showers with hot water, doors that actually lock, husbands and wives you picked for yourself, or at least swiped right on. No one is waking you up at dawn to check your pulse and negotiate with your corset. No one's painting your portrait while you try to hide a blemish with 10 pounds of powder. And unless you're royalty in disguise, you can eat as many potatoes as you want without worrying that your meal might come with a little bonus political seasoning. Because history is full of impossible expectations, itchy outfits, and a level of daily stress that would make a modern HR department weep. Yet through it all, people, especially queens, found ways to laugh, survive, and sometimes even thrive. They did their best with what they had, even if what they had was a suspicious bedchamber and a wardrobe full of regrets. So tonight, as you tuck yourself in, maybe send a sleepy thank you to every ancestor who survived all this madness. History may be filled with danger, disaster, and the world's worst fashion, but it's also proof that humans are stubborn, hopeful, and, if nothing else, endlessly creative in the face of absurdity. Good night, and may your dreams be free of courtiers, corsets, and the world's most judgmental lapdog.